A very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Pleased to have all of you here with me. I'm Untitled Evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions. I will be the voice of the webinar this afternoon. We welcome you to Season 2 of Reset&Go, aptly named Revive&Grow, which is a part of our unique Saturdays of a Learning Luminary segments set to unfold over the course of the next 3 months. We will deliver 38 segments of pure learning during these sessions, so gear up, get your learning on. In today's segment of Revive and Grow, we're discussing managing your emotions at work, a conversational exchange of experiences used to grasp best practices, alter perceptions, and make note to implement. It is to our benefit in being savvy enough to manage our emotions, is it not? Facilitating the conversation today is Azeem Saheer, a trainer with Luminary Learning Solutions. And we're pleased to have with us on our panel, Sanjiv, Head of Human Resources, Southeast Asia, Swiss Re, Singapore. And joining him is Angela Payne, co-founder of Lead HR, all the way from Canada. Well, over to them now for what promises to be an hour of riveting conversations. See?
Thank you, Anton. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm really excited to host these two fantastic individuals for today's session, Managing Your Emotions at Work. I have two, as I said, two fantastic individuals, Sanjiv Agarawal and Angela Payne, joining me on this particular session, which is going to be a very much important, essential unit at this time of the current corporate world, because everybody knows what sort of situation we are running after this COVID situation comes into play. So, to start off to this particular segment, the managing your emotion at work, why it is really important. Being a leader, why it is really important. Enhancing the performance, why it is really important. And at the same time, building a corporate culture, why these emotions, managing the emotions is really important. To start off with the question, I would like to head towards to Canada. Very good morning, Angela.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining, and I know tolerating this early in the morning over there from your end.
Yes, it is, but it's okay. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. So, Angela, I would like to start off with the aspect of, of the performance aspect of why it is really important to manage the emotions, because people are driven by the emotions, and and people are running the organizations. In between that, why it is really important, with your experience, to manage these emotions at workplace?
Yeah, thank you. The world is made of emotional people, and it's really what drives us, right? Emotions are really the filter for everything that we do. There's no, taking that away. So this idea that people have that, perhaps you could, have rational discussion or leave your emotions at the door when you're having a conversation in the workplace. It doesn't exist. That's not true. Everybody brings their emotions with them. It's the way the brain actually even works. So the reality is that emotions drive people, and people, pretty much drive performance and in organizations. And so, it's a requirement of good leadership. However, it's a requirement for it to be in balance, and in your teams and your staff and even your colleagues around you, their expectation is that, as you mentioned, Azeem, that it's in balance. And that you're using it in balance to make good decisions and to manage your stress and all these things that are competencies inside of your emotional intelligence and how you show up at work.
Thank you, Angela. That I really like the word you ended up, like how you show up, right? So what I sense that how you show up is what is demonstrated by you at a particular aspect. That means I'm as a leader, how am I showing up to the people? How am I treating them? I'm showing empathy, or am I like making decisions, making other people involved? In that context, I'd like to head towards Sanjiv. Sanjiv, we all know that there is people leave the organizations, right? People leave organization. So everybody knows that there's a lot of saying goes around. People don't leave organization, people leave, right? With the experience you've had all over your career, I would like to have your input on this. What do you think about that statement?
Thanks, Azeem, and thanks for having me on the show. And maybe I just back to first what Angela said. I really feel that's the essence of what we do at workplace, which is showing up and how we show up. It's all about what we do. Now, coming back to your question about why people leave and people leave people or people leave organizations and stuff like that. I think there are lots of sides to this situation, right? Is it always true that people leave people? Not necessarily. People get married and leave. That has got nothing to do with people leaving people as well, right? But attrition in any organization has an emotional angle to it, like any other actions that people do. People perform, and maybe I take a step back a little bit. And I share with you my version of how I deal with emotion at workplace. And for me, I've always believed we have two parts in our head. One is the emotional part, and then there is the logical, rational part. And how I visualize these two parts is the emotional part is like an elephant, the powerful elephant that has the energy to drive us. And the rational, logical part is the guy sitting on the elephant trying to control the elephant. But for me, the power resides in the elephant and not necessarily the logical, rational person sitting on that elephant who has the tools, who has the logic, but not necessarily the same energy. So for me, it's that really helps me manage this transition between my rational self and my emotional self, and how I come across or how I show up. Because whatever we do at workplace, bring the emotional self of us, brings the energy, brings the passion, and the logical self of ours tries to control it, right? And one is not useful without the other.
Thank you,
So going back to your attrition question, I think the decision is driven by emotion to a large extent. And in some cases, there is a logical overtone to it, in some cases not. And when it is purely driven by emotion, it is about people. We don't get emotional about organizations, we get emotional about people in that organization.
Fantastic thoughts, Sanjiv. That was really very insightful. Angela, do you like to share anything on that?
Yeah,
I like the metaphor with Sanjiv used, the elephant,
Oh my gosh, me too. I like that a lot. And I actually could visualize, me sitting on top of the elephant and trying to like rein it in. So, thank you. I agree. And while I believe that, people leave people and bad bosses and toxic workplaces, there's other reasons why they do as well. It's not only that, but I'd say, where there is an opportunity or where people given the two choices, then obviously, they would prefer to show up in a workplace where they have the opportunity be their best selves, and that their manager or their leader, helps them bring that out, and quite frankly, that they can rely on the leader to be balanced, and rely on the leader to have certain qualities about them that make them emotionally intelligent. I once had a leader who, you never were sure what you were going to get when you walked in her office. And some days she would come out of her office, with her hands sort of waving in the air, and you thought, oh gosh, that's the bad leader that I don't really want to have to deal with. And so everybody kind of went the other way and stayed out of her way. Sometimes she'd come out of her office and, she'd be trying to engage you in this conversation, and you're sort of just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that's a really tough environment to stay in, because you're constantly, or at least for me, I was constantly sort of sitting on my, toes, wondering what kind of person was going to show up in front of me. And that's hard for teams to sort of excel in. And I think that's a place where, that idea of working for, somebody or working for somebody who's controlling or not controlling their elephant very well, Sanjiv, is actually true, and how it shows up. And that can be disheartening, and it can keep you really off balance as a team member.
I agree. That happens all the time. And that's the leadership behavior, right? You tend to work with leaders who can be predictable. You can be sure of their response, their ethos, their values, and how they will take any position. People don't get engaged with leaders who are unpredictable, and not just true for any kind of organization. You look at leaders across the spectrum of leadership, right? Politics, social leadership, community, whatever. Most leaders who drive people behind them are consistent with what their objective is, how they take those stands, and they go to lengths to maintain that consistency, so that people can continue to believe in them. And what Angela described in her example is a true example of a leader whose elephant, and I think we got a good story today learning about elephant, but whose elephant is not being controlled, right? So the elephant goes from one extreme to another and pulls the whole team together with them.
Yes, for sure.
Fantastic thoughts. Lovely hearing from you all. As emotion aspect, getting into more practical, Angela and Sanjiv, with a lot of exposure, experience, being a coach, and etc., etc. There are a lot of viewers who are listening might be expecting this question. Leadership is a certain position which is influential position, but above that leadership also there's a leadership, right? So it sounds like a sandwich scenario here. So what happened in a practical scenario? Your boss starting, or your leader, manager starting, giving a lot of pressure, you absorb that pressure and you just go down and put towards the lower part of the people that pressure, where you just put the stress out, right? And you are expecting certain targets or goals to KPIs to be achieved, but the way you send across that pressure to the lower people has a big impact on the performance. So I would like to hear from both of you, like, what would be a good practice a leader can follow, absorb that pressure, and just nicely, with a sense of very emotionally intelligent way, how that can just spread across, where he or she can achieve the objective or the KPI, what it matters. But the reason why I'm asking this is a very competitive world now. The corporate is running very harder technology advancement. It's like a rat race. You go behind and that other person comes. So with this advancement of technology, how can a leader bring a performance in a better way, showing up in a better way? Over to you.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead, Sanjiv?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
So Sanjiv, ladies first.
Ladies first. Thank you. I
Sorry,
think.
I'm saying in my world, the more intelligent people first. I always try to follow.
Thank you. I'll slip you $20 later. I think that there's a couple things, and that's a really real example, Azeem, of what happens, right? That there's all this pressure to perform and all this pressure to behave in a certain way, and I would say two things. One, the way that you can help ensure that you can get your teams to the right space without sort of just downloading everything you're getting from above is a couple of things that we say in the emotional intelligent world, which is, what is your own self-actualization? So can you stop and think about where you are in the place, and know that if you go back to purpose and meaning, that there is an opportunity for you to drive the message to your people in a purposeful and meaningful way, but you have to understand that about yourself. And then you need to really rely on your relationships or your interpersonal relationships that you have with your team, because if you can strengthen those, then you almost have like credits in the bank that you can use to ensure that you have a good relationship and they understand where you're coming from. It's not easy to be sort of that middle, but the reality is that regardless of the pressure you're getting, your people still expect you to behave a certain way, and taking that and turning that around just as sort of a download is really, I don't believe, sort of the best leader that you can be. And you've got to figure out a way to deal with the relationship you have above, but that shouldn't really impact the way you deal with your relationship below. And I think that there's a couple of ways to do that. And one definitely is around the relationships that you have with your own people, and how those manifest themselves and how those work, and not to say that that's an easy road, but I think it's a good start. And while Sanjeev's answering that, I'll think of an example that I could share.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Angela. I think this is really relevant. So from my perspective, the piece that I follow, I truly understand what your situation that you've described, Azeem. All of us have kind of seen that happen, right? And what I tend to practice is the concept of a third space. So let me give you what I do with that. So I come out of a conversation which was tough, which had a lot of pressure and got downloaded, expectations started up, whatever that is. Obviously, it has an impact on individuals, right? You being a leader or not, as a human being, you are absorbing a lot of stress, you're taking a lot of pressure. And what I do is that I consider myself in the first space. From there onwards, my next action is what I'm going to do next, which is my second space, right? In a lot of situations like these, the second space involves your own team, where you are then bringing about the actions, plans, what went wrong, what you move next, etc. And what I tend to do is insert a third space between these two. So after getting a download and before I proceed to have a conversation with anybody else, I create a third space for myself, which is just about me. And what it does in reality is it does not bring the same emotion from my first space into my second space. So I create a conscious break. So if I'm feeling pressured and if I'm feeling really stressed out, even if my words don't flow in the same tone, my body language will, my thoughts will, right? Because I'm coming from a very stressful conversation. Creating this third space helps me come back to my natural emotion, a more stable, more calmer emotion. It also helps me think through what am I going to do next with it, right? Am I going to focus on what went wrong? Am I going to focus on what are the next steps? Am I going to focus on Who should I leverage? Because you always have two ways of dealing with any situation, right? Either you focus on the positives and use your strengths to deal with it, or you try to figure out what went wrong and try to correct that, and therefore focus on areas which potentially are not the strength of the team or the individuals in those teams. Right? And it helps you articulate your thought process. And hopefully, it also breaks the emotion that you're feeling from the conversation in the first instance, right? And I found that to be useful. Of course, it takes practice. First time I tried it didn't work, to be honest. And there is a risk of coming across not genuine, right? There's a lot of expectation on leaders that we tend to put on, and there's limited opportunity for leaders to really have safe environments to get better at these expectations and these skills, right? They are put in the seat from the word go. The first day you get a team, you are expected to be a leader, you are under a microscope, right? And then you are trying to deal with all of those things. So at times I feel leaders tend to have limited opportunities for safe environments, and that's how this third space concept it really helps, I feel. It gives a safe space for a leader in a stressful situation, and actually not necessarily only for leaders. Even when you are dealing with a stressful situation and you're trying to figure out what to do next, that whole third space concept helps in my experience. So something for people to consider. Back to Angela, I'm sure you have got a few examples.
Thanks, Sanjiv. The third space concept is a good way to just take the time to breathe and figure out your next move before there's this idea like saying something before you regret that, right? So getting yourself back in control, managing your impulse to actually just go out and download that. So that's a way to sort of create space. There's this, and this used to happen to me personally. I used to use the idea of 6 seconds. I knew that I had learned that you feel an emotion and it stays with you for 6 seconds. You need to sort of breathe it in and breathe it out. And so I used to use the 6 seconds to just get me back to a better place, where I was at least more in control of that emotion and I could name it a little better. And once I was able to name it a little better, then I could figure out how to actually, manage it, whether it was, the more nuanced version of angry or, annoyed or, actually fearful. It was a way for me to sort of just recognize it, give myself the 6 seconds, and then not put myself in a place where, I would use those 6 seconds inappropriately.
In my experience, it takes longer than 6 seconds, but maybe.
Well, 6 seconds just lets me, just 6 seconds just lets me articulate it. It doesn't actually necessarily take that away.
Fantastic thoughts. I really like to reflect on the Sanjeev's third space and the Angela, what she said, labeling the emotion. I recently read a book on emotional agility by Dr. Susan David. This is what exactly she says. When we see the emotion from a third-party aspect, as like third space, what Sanjeev did, you can easily identify the emotion. And as Angela said, if you can identify and label that emotion, she's saying you can easily understood who you are, what you need to do. So that you both did just resemble that, and that's I had that thought I just shared with you guys all. That. With that conversation, I'm just directing a little bit towards leadership. Angela, this is for you, right? Helping leaders, right, lead well through emotional intelligence in order to increase their teams and personal effectiveness. How this can reflect to you on a leadership role. Angela, does this sound very familiar to you?
Yes, yes, this is my bio. This is my bio line that I have, and yeah, absolutely.
Because it gave me very good a point where the emotion and the leadership can play a vital role for the team's performance, from organizational performance.
Yes.
So because leaders lead the whole team, right? So
Yes.
it was a very catchy thing. So if you can just elaborate and just give an explanation or give an example for everyone's benefit who are like the viewers at the moment. So it'll be great.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. You know, my work and my business is premised on the fact that, you know, people go to work to contribute, that they go with the best of intentions and they go with the desire to make a difference. And sometimes they arrive in organizations where the leader who is assigned or appointed doesn't necessarily, you know, is not necessarily the best leader. And the reality is that's not their fault, right? They come there to have a good experience. And unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't always work. And the reality is that the leader plays a really big portion, as we talked about, around people leaving leaders, and you know, and even as Sanjiv said, the fact that, you know, lots of times these leaders are put in positions that they don't get the support that they may need, and nobody really teaches them, besides technical skills and how to do the job and how to read their P&L and, you know, how to, you know, drive their sales performance. And so that is the sort of the human skills that I think, you know, people still need to practice. And when they don't practice, they don't, you know, how do they come on these unless they're very avid readers and, you know, finding and searching out that space. As it relates to the team, I think that while I even personally myself have had the opportunity as an executive to have many coaches through my career, personal coaches, I don't believe that it rests solely with the leader. I don't believe that the fate solely rests with the leader, that there is an opportunity for team effectiveness that happens when the leader can, you know, engage their team and get a little bit wider then. And so in combination, using team coaching to identify not only the intelligence, emotional intelligence of the leader, but then also to bring the team along with it. This concept of the heroic leader, I don't know, Sanjiv, if you have a thought on this, but I don't believe that person exists or should hold the whole part of the organization solely on their back. There is a team that now, with teams and the responsibility of teams, that they really can, you know, more incredibly impact an organization. And so I've seen this in action many, many times when, even through my own work, that the team is, when they're empowered, when they have a corporate, you know, when they have a common purpose, they really can achieve wonderful things. Yes, the leader has a very big portion in that, but the team can also help the leader. The team has a very important role in assisting the leader to lead well.
Oh, absolutely, Angela. I couldn't agree more with you. I think this again goes back to a little bit of our emotion, right? The moment we get into a leadership role, our emotional romanticization of that title takes over. And then we think we are in the position where we have to get it right every time, right? And we are going to be whiter than white. And one may or may not have the skill or experience of dealing with it, but leaders don't tend to ask for help, because somehow it feels, okay, I'm in this position, I have to take the decision. How can I ask for help? It will reflect poorly on me, or it will make me feel vulnerable. And I think that's the biggest challenge in this situation. We tend to let our emotional self, for this conversation, maybe our elephant, take over as in our leadership roles, right? And that's our biggest injustice to ourselves. Right? I've worked with leaders in CEO roles and otherwise, and you can see them struggle in private, and they walk out into the teams and they just become different. And I'm sitting there wondering, what happened here? Did this person change, or this person is just faking it? And the biggest challenge is when you start to get into this faking business of coming across as a leader, you start to make wrong decisions. because you're not coming from a place of genuine intent. You're coming from a place of keeping a facade, of I should be seen as a leader, and hence my decision should align with that. And again, I go back outside of corporates. You see a lot of leadership trust deficit that we see in our society is coming from that kind of behavior. Right? Where leaders tend to live for that facade rather than their original idea of why they became the leaders.
Sanjiv, what you're saying to say is authenticity is really important in this particular area. What you're trying to say is...
So, Azeem, think about it this way. We make managers in organizations because of a role. But leaders are people whom people want to be led by. And why would I want to be led by somebody? Because there's an inspiration in that person, because that person has genuine intent, and I believe it helps me grow further. And without that genuinity, you cannot create the trust that a leader needs to have from its people. So in my view, the basic premise of leadership starts from genuineness. And that genuineness involves saying sorry when it goes wrong, or saying, look, I don't know, I need help, or I'll figure it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely spot on. That's what I think most of our leadership goes wrong, where like, because okay, I am a leader, that I should not go and ask for help from my team members. It will be a big problem. They'll misunderstand me, or they're like, in that concept. But I truly agree with Sanjiv that it's, again, with Angela also, it's both sides of the coin, right? Team also need to understand the leadership also need to understand the team, where their emotions are in the middle, which we need to balance it. That's wonderful. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to slightly shift into another important element on this conversation in terms of managing emotion at workplace. When you talk about a corporate culture, we know that shared values, attitudes, beliefs, and standards, everything is there. And more importantly, culture is the key ingredients for the organizational success that everybody talks about, everybody knows. And a leader plays a key role in this success also. When talking about a culture, I know for a fact, Sanjiv, that you have been traveling you have been in Sri Lanka, in India, you have been like leading a lot of companies now in your Asia Pacific. You have seen different cultures in terms of country or the region wise. And in terms of corporate culture also, you have seen a lot of difference. Where does emotion come in this aspect? If you can share your experience, it would be great.
Sure. I think culture, different organizations define their culture differently. But there is an element of culture which comes from location as well. Right? An organization tends to create a culture for itself which is consistent across, but then within that organization there happens to be subcultures. One team behaves differently to the other team, and you can find this across the board. Right? One geography has a different tone to that culture versus another geography of the same organization. And so culture really plays a big role in this. And from an emotion perspective, culture really is defining how comfortable the organization is in expressing or acknowledging emotion. Some cultures are open to it, some cultures aren't. Some communities are open to it, some communities aren't. Right? Emotion exists across the board. That's a more basic human trait. It's about how much do we acknowledge the role of that emotion in our day-to-day life, how comfortable we are in talking. How many times have we gone out, Machan, I'm not feeling good today in the office, right? Can you do that in some other cultures? Probably not. Right? So I think the element of culture in organizations has to be clearly articulated as to what is it that we really want our culture to be. And a lot of times, organizations are focusing on performance, and therefore the culture becomes a little bit more tactical in that respect. And again, depends on where the culture is being formed, what kind of nuances we are building into it. Each organization builds it from a different perspective of what they want to achieve. And then when you become a multinational organization, it gets overlaid by subcultures that are coming from your locations, geographies, where you're recruiting people from, things like that, right? If you're bringing people in, freshers right from college, your culture is going to be a little bit different than an organization which is only hiring people from experienced organizations. Right? So these things will all add in. The role of emotion, I think, is becoming more and more visible now, and I see more organizations becoming open about talking on this topic. COVID has been a great example. Every organization has spoken about wellness in the past, but the intensity of it, the real intent behind workplace wellness is coming across now, right? And that is driven by pure emotion, right? So I think as we go into the future, I see this space really becoming a core part of building our culture in organizations and how we treat each other and how to acknowledge emotion, because the first thing you do in a wellness, well-being kind of a framework is acknowledge your emotional state. How are you feeling today? Right? And that's when you start to deal with it. Right?
Yeah, Sanjiv, I think that in many ways, perhaps COVID provided an opportunity for organizations to, reset and rethink about how, their EAP providers really were providing support. That it's not just sort of the phone number that they use on the side of the desk that perhaps, helps an organization think about wellness and their well-being. And I think that as it relates to culture specifically, you're absolutely right. Subcultures exist within cultures, and there's a couple of ways that I think about culture, and even for leaders, the reality is whether they like it or not, there exists a culture in their company. It might not be the one that they want, but they can't get away from it. So the idea that they need to think about what it is, the kind of culture that they'd like to create or that they'd like to shift to, and be very deliberate about that and model that behavior themselves, because culture really is about the norms and behaviors and the conduct in which people work, and the norms and rules, the unspoken rules even that exist inside your organization. And what you want is the people that go out to their Christmas party or to their kids soccer team, and somebody asks them what's it like to work at XYZ company, their answer, that's the culture. So whether it's open or it's collaborative or it's innovative or it's based on trust, or these things that I can be myself at my job, which I love. These are all things that are feelings. And that's all about your emotion and the way you feel about your organization. And, you want to create the best feelings that you can for your employees. And that for me is about the culture.
I'm very tempted, so I must bring this back to elephants. We are going to be about elephants today. Sorry.
You can't help yourself.
So again, the combination of culture and strategy. And I use this example, culture is the elephant and strategy is the person on top of that elephant trying to control the direction.
Yes, yeah. I don't know if you've read Peter Drucker and any of Peter Drucker's work, but his work around that, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? The best intention of an organization can easily be undermined by the collective culture that exists, inside the organization. And that's about people, and that's about people, and the way they feel about it. So yeah, completely agree.
Absolutely. I think, as I said, cultures, as Sanjiv said, it's different, right? When I've been in the Middle East for some time, the culture in Sri Lanka and the Middle East is totally different. Where like I really quickly need to adapt to the culture. If not, I'll be like not going along with the other members of the team. So that's the adaptability part of the emotion aspect. I believe I had to have, which
Yes.
is really important. At the same element, when you say about the culture, there is a culture like in every corporate it exists. There is a small, rift between the team leader and the member. He or she said, uh, let's say a scenario like this: if a leader subordinates very experienced, well knowledgeable of the subject matter, but a superior comes in the middle, quickly, very recruited, very newly, and he's trying to take a lot of things very differently, right? Because not understanding the team or the team not understanding the leaders is the question mark there. In that particular scenario, what come to a particular one platform, drive on the performance? How can you suggest something on us?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the question, Azeem, because you were kind of cutting a little bit in and out for me. Is the question that the new leader comes into the organization and needs to understand how to fit into that organization?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, something like that. And add on to that, if you see the existing subordinate will have a very good background of the organization, and he might be a great performer, well experienced. What just this he had seen a lot of things in my personal life also. I've seen a lot of corporates. A new manager comes in, he tries to do everything very differently without understanding the existing culture of the organization. In that particular, if as a leader and as a team members, how can they like really work on this particular element?
Yeah. So I would say, I'll start from the leadership perspective. From the leader's perspective, kind of shame on them, because that's a little bit about the role of the leader to figure out how to fit into that culture. There's a tactic that I've used, or a piece that I've used with my coaching clients around the first 100 days, right? It exists when a new president or a new office member in politics goes into office. It's a very easy strategy to use for a leader, even though a leader might be getting a very good onboarding experience through the organization. But I always encourage my leaders to work on this 100-day plan. It's to really understand who the stakeholders are, what the relationships are, who's the customer base. It's really a canvas or a landscape that they can use to, get the lay of the land and figure out that culture, because, leadership has a responsibility. I believe that there is a responsibleness that a leader has to, it kind of goes along this lines of what Sanjiv said around, owning that space and knowing that, yes, there's a title that goes with it, but there is a real direct responsibility that goes with this leadership role, and not to be taken lightly, because that's about your accountability and your ability to really fit into the role. And so, I say that it's, you're the leader's opportunity to step up and step into the role, so that can work. So that's sort of from my perspective on the leader side, and the canvas is a good way to sort of articulate that, and then, be able to visualize it and to work in a framework. And then from the employee side, I think, an engaged employee wants the person to fit. And so I think that engagement helps drive them to help coach informally the leader, to help them fit into the organization. And I think that's a process. But again, if you think about your success being connected, there's a realness about the fact that you want the leader to succeed as well. So, using that premise, or starting with that good assumption, will help you perhaps get there a little bit easier.
So maybe, I'll take a few minutes again, if you're okay with that. I want to share a couple of perspectives around this, right? So what Angela said, I think makes real sense. And what I tend to see work well is when the leader starts to first opens themselves up with the team to say, look, this is where I am, this is who I am, these are my strengths, these are areas where I'm not good at, stuff like that, right? Making yourself vulnerable with your team and laying your trust in the team. That's a good place to start, because then that builds the foundation for a trusting relationship. The team starts to believe, okay, this person is open with us. This person has clarified their intent and their place of operation. So we can then start to see how we engage with this person. I can understand this person. We only start to trust somebody when we think we understand them. And a leader can make that first step, right? And then the leader has to go into each individual and understand, make that effort of understanding them, right? Now, the hard part starts from there. Because then once you start to understand, you really have to be A, good at understanding people from the conversations, B, then understanding how are you going to engage all of these different personalities together, right? You can't take all of them to cricket club in the evening, have a round of drinks and think that my team is engaged. I'm missing cricket club, you can see that.
Yeah, cricket in Canada not as popular.
Yeah, but it's nothing to do with playing cricket. It's just about drinking beer.
Socializing.
Oh, drinking beer. Yes.
Right. But having said that, it's a long-term game. So there are examples I have seen where a boss comes in, pushes through the agenda, and in the short run is successful as well. It happens. So it's not always, the ideal way of doing things that works. The difference is, in the short run, if you've got a challenge that you need to deal with, which has a ticking time bomb attached to it, then you may not do this. Then you may not do the nice boss trying to get to know everybody. And that also helps the team understand what this boss comes with, right? So you can do it if you have the luxury of time and have the ability to do that, or you do it through your actions. Irrespective of whatever path you choose or not choose, just do it because that's the only way you are still doing that thing. You are setting people either to trust you or not to trust you. So some leaders do it consciously, some leaders don't do it consciously, but they still end up in the same place. And therefore, the real, I think the real solution to this is knowing what you want to do and making that choice. Otherwise, your elephant is running wild. Sorry, I'm really having fun with elephants.
This needs to be the title of your book.
Yeah, right.
The elephant. But it does give a great metaphor, I think.
Yes.
Unless you don't control with the emotion, with the elephant, as Sanjiv said, it will go all of the way. So your performance is not targeted and you will not reach anywhere where you go. Sanjiv, I remember you took the element of COVID. With COVID coming into play, there have been a lot of change in the work culture, especially the remote working, scenarios. EI or emotionally intelligence or understanding emotion is very difficult when you're in a remote scenario, right? I believe in Singapore also they had a lot of sense of remote working. Even in Canada also, we all experience. In that aspect, how can we cultivate this particular approach? Because this is the moment we need emotionally intelligent or understanding the emotion than ever, because that is the approach, because everybody is going through difficult times, right? So in that approach, Sanjiv, can you share your experience? Because what I'll give an example. There was one of my friend who was talking to me. He works for an IT department in that company. So in a normal scenario, he works for 5 days. But now he has been working for Saturday, Sunday, and etc., etc. So in that context, because we don't see people, we don't see the emotions from the face or the response. In that aspect, how can we cultivate this particular scenario in a remote working environment?
So I think, Azeem, it's a million-dollar question, because right now I don't know the right answer to it. Right? I don't think many people do. It is an evolving situation. Everybody's dealing with it. I have never worked from home all my life before COVID. I didn't really have a sense of working from home. I worked with organizations where people in my team would work from home regularly. But for me, when I come home, I'm home. I'm not working. And those of the people who might know me know that if I don't work, I don't work. And therefore, for me, this has been really a stressful period, because I was forced to work from home. And the first month or so, I was like really frustrated. But then slowly I realized this is, I can't do much about it, so I might as well start getting used to the idea. And I went through the whole journey of managing change myself. It's been interesting, right? And like you said, right, when you're starting to work from home, not just the fact that you're working longer hours, you're also working faster, because everybody else is also working from home. So everybody's available for every call. Decisions are taking place faster, because nobody's traveling, nobody's on a holiday, everybody's around, on a call, available to you. People are not taking leaves. So the organizations have also managed to get more work done in this time frame. Right? Of course, it depends on kinds of roles you are in, but for a lot of organizations who were able to adapt faster, they could get a lot more done, because everybody's kind of at home, available to you. So the decisions, nobody's traveling, nobody's on a conference, nobody's on offsite, nobody's on a holiday, everybody's around. You get together and take a call and move on. So it is a real challenge for people, right? On top of it, then organizations are arranging webinars like these, how to deal with stress, how to deal with this. I've got a webinar fatigue as well, trying to attend, because my organization also wants me to understand how not to get frustrated with all of these things and how to keep positive. I'm organizing half of those webinars and I'm thinking, why am I doing that? Right? So all sorts of things are happening right now. Everybody's trying to experiment with something or the other. And a short answer to your question is really going back to the basics of being genuinely interested. So I'll give you a couple of examples, what I've done so far. I have a call with my team once a week, whenever they want. And we don't talk about work, right? And that's all we do. Half an hour, everybody just chilling, a pet roaming around, a kid making this thing, somebody's in the kitchen cooking something and talking. That's all we do, right? We don't do any meetings on Fridays. No meeting Fridays, right? Recently, we started a radio station. We don't talk about work. We just talk about music, and we just play music. Right? So these are just some of the tactical solutions that one can come up with, where we are trying to get people to feel that it is not all about work. Because right now the situation makes it a lot about work. Like you just said, people are working long hours and people are working, you get up from your bed, you can be in office. It takes 2 minutes. Right? And vice versa. You can apply, I apply for leave every week because I want to also be a role model, you see. And then I end up working because what else to do? I'm getting bored at home.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a bit of a unique situation. It's opening doors, and different people are coming up with different ways of dealing with it. I think my go-to position is being genuinely interested, not about work, but about people, and that should get you far enough.
Yes.
Hopefully something will come up by that time that we can temperature check people for their emotional well-being. Over to you, Angela.
Yeah.
Angela, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we my partner and I had put out some content about this, because the reality is that you people have an expectation that you get to know them, right? That you and in some ways, oddly enough, I think this opportunity of remote work has created different kinds of relationships, or different kinds of meaningful relationships. Because you're right, Sanjiv, you see, did you know that, your coworker that sat beside you lived in an apartment versus in a house, or did you know that they had dinner with their grandmother every week at 6 o'clock, and so in some ways there's been some deeper connections with people because you've had a peek more into their life. And because it's all sort of around them and behind them, which has helped people perhaps get more connection, but I think has also added this extra layer of pressure or stress, because if people were sort of holding that back or they were not sort of bringing that to work, then now this line has been very blurred between the two. So I think it also depends on the person. For an extrovert like me, being at home for 4 months has been really, really hard. And I love to see people on screen, whereas I know some of my teams, they're like, oh God, please don't put me on another conference call, like video call. I don't want to be on another one today. So I think it's really understanding the people. And so using your relationship and your emotional intelligence to know and to sense and to know where your people are at that particular time. And so be really attuned to that.
Perfect. So those who are viewers who are tuning in with us in this particular webinar, here you go. Perfect 2 examples from expertise on how to understand emotions. Organize your conference call, but don't talk officials. Let's just be yourself. Ask how you are, what you are saying, or just have a small competition. Who cooks what? Sanjiv?
Yes.
Yeah. So something like that. I think this is the way forward in terms of we never know when, but the new normal is going to be normal. But understanding emotions is going to have a lot of run we are going to go through. So in that context, I think we'll have about a couple of minutes more. So I would like to throw out one in general for both. According to a survey done by the career builders in US, almost 75% of the respondents stated that they value the employees being more EQ, right? And a lot of research has been done. Even Daniel Goleman says, who's the godfather of emotional intelligence? We say 85% of the high performers, leaders are emotionally intelligent. These are the research based. And we have seen in practical lives also that those who are people's person, team runs better performance. In that aspect, I'd like to have the last question for this for the evening today. For Angela, it's morning. So why emotionally intelligent is so much valued as a workplace skill? This is my last question I want to place for Sanjiv and Angela. So Sanjiv, if you can start off, it would be great.
I think it was always a very important skill. We are just getting more and more aware of it now, and we're talking more about it now. But if you look at successful leaders, they've always been emotionally intelligent. Right? We didn't have these kind of tags, and we didn't talk about it much. There wasn't enough models around how to become more emotionally intelligent, etc. And like you said, Azeem, it's not just a corporate world. One who is able to manage self better, will always find it easier, relatively, to influence others. And that's all success is captured by. If you think about it, what we're talking about success in our context is our ability to influence others. In a way, that's kind of leads to success. And we will only be able to influence others efficiently if we can manage ourselves well first.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add on to that, because I very well said, Sanjiv, people, remember moments in time that you have with them, right? They remember the feeling that you give them. They thrive on the way they felt around you, and so it's a natural it's a natural inclination for people to want to be around people who make them feel good, and that's true about your outside relationships, and it's true about work. There's really no difference, and so people gravitate to those kinds of leaders who help create these connections and these moments, which is what emotional intelligence is. So I agree with you that it's always existed, and why it's so desirable is because organizations want transformation. They want to move faster. They want these things that are confines or constructs of business, but yet they all have to be done through people. And no matter if you're trying to put AI or technology into your company, they all have to be done and led through people. And so this ability for people to create a shared vision, to bring people along, as Sanjiv said, to influence people and to really lay down a story that people want to follow, that's all about people and their relationships with people. And so I don't think it's agreed. I don't think it's new. I just think the importance of it is just bubbling more to the surface, and more work has been put around it. The World Economic Forum, this last year suggested that emotional intelligence is one of the fastest rising skills that they require in leaders. I don't know that it was never, not a skill that they required, but to everyone's point, the identification of it, the ability to recognize that it's a muscle that can be learned and taught and practiced is really important, because then I think there's a way forward for people to actually become more emotionally intelligent, and that will be a wonderful place.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sanjiv and Angela, for sharing that. Why, especially in this particular fast changing with technology, with a lot of industrial revolution, fourth industrial revolution on the face, we are looking at AI, talking about AI these days, but me and you now at the moment, the viewers are listening to us and looking at this webinar, and we just made them realize it's AI also really important. I always believed it's how you show up. How you show up will demonstrate how you feel about others. When others feel well, I always believe that's the engagement part comes into play, and it's enough when you start engaging. As Sanjiv said, early stage of the webinar, when you start engaging, I believe performance and the culture will automatically fall in place. So, ladies and gentlemen, let my heartfelt thanks to Sanjay Agarawal, Head of Human Resource, Southeast Asia for Swiss Re Singapore. And thank you very much, Angela. I know we have disturbed early in the morning, but thank you for spending a valuable time, both Sanjiv and Angela. Angela is the co-founder of Lead HR of Canada. And with that, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for Revive and Grow. And signing off, as your host, my name is Azeem Saheer, and I just pass over to Anton to wrap up the session. Thank you. Have a blessed, great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Sanjiv. Thank you, Angela. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you for joining us and for that wonderful knowledge share, which certainly kept us in rapt attention. Azeem, once again, thank you for sharing this wonderful conversation. Well, perhaps one of the most essential skills in today's workplace is emotional intelligence, and that being the only constant which keeps changing at a lightning speed. While understanding our reactions and that of others will certainly arm us with the necessary ammunition to be able to handle the daily challenges and changes that gets thrown in our way. So whether you're a leader or an employee, this certainly is an essential skill which affects every facet of our professional lives. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank H1, our technology partners, who've been with us right throughout the series. Thank you very much, Samath and his team. Next week, join us again for the Revive and Grow series segment, which discusses how to increase our energy at work and focus at work. And watch our social media space for more details. Coming up in the next hour is This, That, and the Other, hosted by Varun. Click in and stay glued in as we discuss side hustle? Is it on when employed? Well, on that note, once again, thank you very much. It has been an absolute pleasure. Have a good afternoon.